What's going on, everybody? Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. We hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and that you're excited. Today is Tuesday, August 30th, 2022. Only one more day left in the month of August. Then the calendar turns to September. The regular season is now, 9 days away from us? That's right. 9 days from now, the Buffalo Bills and Los Angeles Rams will get the season started. Of course, last year, the season opener was the Buccaneers, the Cowboys. We'll see that game in week one. It will just be on Sunday Night Football as opposed to the first Thursday. So that will mean if the regular season opener is 9 days away, that means the Cowboys opener is 12 days away. But today, Tuesday, August 30th, a significant day because the Dallas Cowboys have officially set their initial 53-man roster. We're about to look at it, but I want to stress this is the initial 53-man roster. There are going to be 53 names on the screen that we're going to put up right here. It is going to change, but we can still learn a lot about this. By the way, I played a game on Twitter. You can follow me there at Ochoa, where I asked people to tweet me random words, thinking, every now and then, if you tweet me some random words, we'll figure out a way to incorporate them. So I promised I will incorporate 3 random words into today's show. If you have a random word you are challenging me to incorporate into a video in the future, hit me up on Twitter or Instagram at Ochoa. Let's take a look at it. Here is the initial Dallas Cowboys 53-man roster for anyone who is ready to drink the Kool-Aid. Shout out to K Gordon Flash on Twitter. All right, so looking at this, it's weird. All right, there's only one quarterback. There's only one specialist. And the reason for this is something we've been talking about for a long time. The Cowboys, like every team in the NFL, are taking advantage of roster manipulation tools. What do we mean by that? Well, if we look at the wide receiver position, down there at the very bottom, right above Dennis Houston, who did make it, congratulations to Dennis Houston. I was incorrect in my own personal 53-man roster prediction. James Washington needs to be placed on the injured reserve. We obviously know he has an injury. He's not expected back until mid-October. You look at the offensive line there all the way on the right side. Tyron Smith is there. We all know that Tyron obviously probably not going to be able to play for the Cowboys this season. If he does, it's going to be December at best, but the Cowboys want to keep the door for that open. So what does that mean? What does that have to do with roster manipulation? You look at those two players as an example, James Washington, Tyron Smith. The Cowboys want to place them on injured reserve so they do not count against their roster. But the way NFL rules work, players who are going to be brought back or players who you want to bring back initially have to be carried, have to be on your initial 53-man roster. So if the Cowboys want to bring James Washington, Tyron Smith, or anybody here back from injured reserve at any point this season, they have to be on this screen that you're looking at. So the Cowboys get rid of players who they can afford to lose, who they can afford to quote-unquote cut right now to carry them. After a day, the Cowboys are going to place these players on injured reserve, and they'll bring players back. Who are the Cowboys going to be bringing back? Well, you look at quarterback. They only have one right now. All right, Cooper Rush, Will Grier, Ben DiNucci, all gone. We'll see what happens with Ben DiNucci. Will Grier, if he clears waivers, is maybe somebody who could wind up on the Cowboys practice squad. But that waivers thing is important, all right? If you have fewer than 4 years of service in the NFL as far as accrued time, you are subject to waivers. If you have more than that, if you're kind of a veteran of the NFL, you are not subject to waivers, which is why the Cowboys can cut players like Brett Maher or Jake McQuaid and don't have to worry about other teams poaching them. So Cooper Rush, Brett Maher, Jake McQuaid, all cut by the Cowboys just to be brought back as soon as they create open roster spots. Will Grier may wind up on the practice squad. The Cowboys can choose to sign him, of course, assuming he makes it through waivers. You look at the running back position. Zeke Elliott, Tony Pollard, Rico Dowdle. No Malik Davis. I know there's going to be a lot of people disappointed with that. I don't know that is going to change the way we're talking about, everything else that is kind of yet to come for this team. I think that the Cowboys are probably set there. We'll see if Malik Davis clears waivers. He might wind up on this practice squad. Tight end, Dalton Schultz, Jake Ferguson, Peyton Hendershot. No Sean McEwen. The Cowboys did choose to move on. Maybe he winds up on the practice squad. We'll see about that. But either way, the Cowboys are very, very, very high on their young tight ends and the future of the position. I think we all are, understandably. We didn't really go through the wide receivers, but I think that position has kind of been explained a lot to this point. There are a lot of names, obviously, but it's really only 5 receivers when you look at all 8 names. CeeDee Lamb is one of your receivers, obviously. Jalen Tolbert is another. Noah Brown is your third. Simi Fehoko, your fourth. and Dennis Houston your fifth. And what I mean by those being your real receivers is Michael Gallup is not somebody who's going to be playing right away. We'll come back to him in just a moment. Kevontae Turpin, yes, he's going to get some action, obviously, on offense, but he's more of a specialist, but he is technically a wide receiver. James Washington, we've already talked about him. He's going to be on injured reserve. So, yes, he's on the roster, but he's not a receiver who's going to be helping you out. Now, Michael Gallup, why are the Cowboys not placing him on injured reserve? Well, because if they do, the Cowboys, the Michael Gallup thing's a little bit interesting, actually. If we kind of peel the curtain back a little bit here, the Cowboys clearly believe that Michael Gallup's going to be able to help them out sooner rather than later. So they don't want to touch him. You know, there are 53 players on an active NFL roster, but only 46 line up on Sundays, only 46 dress. That's why if you're new to the game, you've probably seen every Sunday, every game day, there are the inactives list, the players who the Cowboys or other NFL teams choose not to dress, choose not to have active and ready to go. So the Cowboys clearly believe that Michael Gallup, we've been talking about this for a few weeks now, they clearly believe that he's going to be ready to go sometime in the first 4 weeks of the season. So they'll carry him on their roster like normal. They'll just have him be inactive early on. And, you know, whenever he's back, they'll be ready to roll. Jerry Jones did say today on Tuesday, August 30th on 105.3 The Fan, that if the season opener against the Buccaneers were the Super Bowl, Michael Gallup would be playing. What he meant by that is obviously if it was a game of extreme significance, Gallup would be playing. So that certainly lends to the idea that Gallup is ready. But anyway, moving on, specialist Brian Anger, the only one on the roster at the moment. That will obviously change. Offensive line, Tyler Smith. Jerry Jones also spoke Tuesday about how Tyler is going to be playing left tackle in all likelihood. We've obviously been talking about that a ton since Tyron Smith's injury from a week ago. You do see Tyron again there at the very bottom. He has to be carried, as mentioned, in order to be eligible to return. Tyler Biadasz, Zach Martin, Terrence Steele, Connor McGovern, Josh Ball, Matt Farniok, Matt Waletzko. I don't think any of this is surprising. We really expected all of these players to make the roster. I think we all also expect the Cowboys to add to this in some way, shape, or form. Whoever that winds up being, I don't know. There was a rumor that popped up on Monday about the Cowboys being interested in trading for Chuma Edoga from the New York Jets. But interestingly enough, as 53-man rosters were initially set across the NFL, it was reported by ESPN's Jeremy Fowler that the Jets were going to keep Chuma Edoga close to the deadline in case a trade developed, but that he might wind up being released. I haven't seen news of his official release yet at this moment that I'm putting this video together, but shout out to Tom Downey of Chat Sports, has one of the best Cowboys YouTube channels out there, who noted that the Cowboys were in all likelihood used as leverage by the Jets on Monday, trying to get something out of a player who they were likely going to cut ultimately. But let's get back to the Cowboys roster. Defensive end, this was very, very, very predictable. DeMarcus Lawrence, Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler Jr., Sam Williams, and Terrell Basham. I don't know that we see any action here. I think this is pretty set as far as the season is concerned, especially when you factor in Micah Parsons and Anthony Barr, obviously pass rushers as well. Defensive tackle, Neville Gallimore, Osa Odighizuwa, Quentin Bohanna, Tristan Hill, Chauncey Golston, who is kind of an end-to-end tackle, as well as the rookie fifth-round pick, John Ridgeway. We'll come back to that. John Ridgeway is a name I certainly want to talk about. In fact, there are a few names, but let's just kind of get through it here. Linebacker, Micah Parsons, Leighton Vander Esch, Jabril Cox, Anthony Barr, both Devin Harper and Luke Gifford made it. A lot of us thought that it would kind of come down to one of them, but for now, they are both on the 53-man roster. At safety, Jaron Kearse, Malik Hooker, Donovan Wilson, Israel Mukuamu, who had an amazing preseason, and yes, the undrafted free agent star, Marquise Bell. Finally, at corner, Trayvon Diggs, Anthony Brown, Jordan Lewis, Deron Bland, who was also a star of the preseason, as well as both day 2 picks last year in Nashawn Wright and Kelvin Joseph. So what's the thing we need to talk about, RJ? Why are you saying that we're going to come back to some of these things? Well, if we look at the names that are absent from this list and names that are reportedly going to be back on this list, the Cowboys have to have a backup quarterback. It's probably going to be Cooper Rush. But so, even if you don't want to call it Cooper, call it arbitrary backup quarterback X. That's one likely spot. The Cowboys have to bring Brett Maher back. That's 2. The Cowboys have to bring Jake McQuaid back, their long snapper. That's 3. The Cowboys are also reportedly going to bring back C.J. Goodwin. C.J.'s technically a corner, kind of in the way that Kevontae Turpin's technically a receiver, but he is a specialist extraordinaire. So in all likelihood, that's 4 names that the Dallas Cowboys are going to have to bring back to this roster. Now, we talked about at the beginning, James Washington and Tyron Smith. Those are 2 names who are obviously going to be headed to injured reserve very, very shortly. So we've got 2 names going out. We need to bring 4 names in. That means we have to find 2 more spots, right? What goes up must come down. If we're going to bring 4 players and people on, we have to get rid of 4 players and people in some way, shape, or form. So who are the other 2? Because we can, without breaking a sweat, decide that Tyron Smith and James Washington are players who the Cowboys are going to move on from. These are the candidates. Obviously, they're not going to touch anything at quarterback, receiver, running back, tight end, maybe offensive line. Matt Waletzko had the injury at the beginning of camp. Obviously, he's played since. I don't know that there's anything that would necessarily go on there, but Matt Waletzko is an option technically to put on injured reserve. At defensive end, there's not really anybody to choose from as well. Defensive tackle, John Ridgway had an injury pop up as of late. Maybe he's somebody who the Cowboys stashed on injured reserve. At linebacker, maybe the Cowboys just choose to cut one of Devin Harper or Luke Gifford. Again, as mentioned, it kind of did feel like it was going to come down to one of them. Maybe the Cowboys just, like I said, make a decision right there in a final capacity. At safety, Israel Mukuamu had an injury at the end of the preseason. Maybe he's somebody who starts the season off on injured reserve. And at corner, Kelvin Joseph left the final preseason game with an injury himself. Maybe the Cowboys put him on injured reserve. I think those are places where these final spots can come from. And that's just to make room for the 4 names that we're talking about here, all right? We've all kind of said as well that the Cowboys in all likelihood are going to explore adding some sort of tackle, maybe even adding some sort of interior depth. So that would necessitate adding all the more spots. But at the very least, we can expect 4 names that we're looking at right here on this screen to change. Tyron Smith and James Washington being the ones that ultimately make sense. It is an energy or a thing that is a little bit palpable. Shout out to Mario_Powers_up, my second word of the day that I promised to incorporate. It's not that difficult. I thought it would be harder. I do have 1 word left. This one is the most difficult, but obviously this was pretty predictable. I think the biggest surprise in terms of the not obvious things, again, somebody is going to look at this and say, how is there no kick or whatever? They're going to fall for it, whatever. You are smart enough to know that these things are going to change. I think the biggest bummer is probably the absence of Malik Davis. There are a lot of people who wanted to see the Cowboys carry 4 running backs, a lot of people who preferred Malik Davis to Rico Dowdle. It's just kind of the way things go. And I know that if you are upset, that it is an upsetting thing to have a player who you wanted on the team not be on the team. But I would just say this was my point all along. We love to talk about how easy it is to find a running back, right? We love to talk about how silly it is to spend expensive resources on the running back position, like the 4th overall pick or like a $90 million contract. Well, the Cowboys discovered Rico Dowdle and Malik Davis without really trying. And so I'm happy that they're carrying Rico Dowdle. I wish that they had been able to carry Malik Davis, but in all likelihood, they will be able to find another running back, very, very easily when the time comes, even if they do decide to move on from Zeke Elliott, even if Tony Pollard does leave in free agency in the spring. But so ultimately, I'm not too worried about that. Other than that, I mean, there was no surprise cut. That doesn't happen every year. I think the most surprising one in the last few years was probably Dan Bailey, and that was 4 years ago at this point in time already. So Sean McEwen, I think, was a little bit surprising at tight end, but it felt obvious that Jake Ferguson and Peyton Hendershot had really taken over the 2nd and 3rd spot. So it's just kind of about, where do you want to go long? Where are you ready to go shallow? The Cowboys are obviously going to use Dalton Schultz a lot, and whatever opportunities they're not going to give to him, it makes sense to give to some younger players on the roster. Defensive tackle, that's a lot of bodies. Tristan Hill didn't make it. A lot of people didn't think that would happen. It does seem that he's going to play out his rookie contract with this team, which felt really, really, really unlikely many different times over the last 3 years. So good for him. Other than that, I think it was all, it was all chalk. It was all predictable. Corner, like I said, we'll see what happens with Kelvin Joseph if he does wind up on injured reserve, but both he and Nashawn Wright made it. For the last few weeks, that also kind of felt like it was going to have to be one or the other. But either way, all told, the Cowboys do have an initial 53-man roster, but like I said, they have a lot of work to do. Don't look at this thing and say, that's it, it's done, get ready to play the Buccaneers. I'm not saying there's going to be some seismic changes to this, but there are a lot of things still to come, a lot of roster manipulation that's going to be happening, and you can count on James Washington and Tyron Smith being off of this list and on an injured reserve sooner rather than later. But that's the 53-man roster in its initial form for the Dallas Cowboys. It's been a bit of a tough week. Been a bit of a tough 7 days or so in the aftermath of the Tyron Smith injury. The energy around the Cowboys has just been this force. It's just kind of been, it feels like we've been fighting, right? Like we've been fighting this thing, this negative energy, almost like the negative energy has manifested itself into this like monster, into this like orangutan. Shout out to Joe Ferguson 92 on Twitter for today's 3rd weird word suggested. Like I said, if you have a challenging word you want me to try to incorporate into one of our shows, you can tweet it at me or send it to me on Instagram at RJ Ochoa. We will have a live Blogging the Boys roundtable later for you this evening, Tuesday evening, 7 p.m. Central Time. If you want to join us along in the fun, you can always see. Obviously, you can always catch the rewatch at your own time here on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. Please make sure you do subscribe, or you can listen to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the Blogging the Boys podcast network, wherever you get your podcast. For now, enjoy the initial 53-man roster. I'll see you tonight on the roundtable. My name is RJ Ochoa. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at RJ Ochoa, on TikTok at RJ.Ochoa. You can send me an email, rj.ochoa@sbnation.com, or you can leave us a comment here, and we'll get to that in short order. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. We'll see you next time.